Welcome again, everyone, to the Soapbox. Ken has chose us a couple of nice songs there, along with the theme of testimony and the fact that if someone's a rebel, someone's a lost sheep, God is waiting there for that person. And so Jordan is going to be sharing today his own personal testimony, bit of a lost sheep, prodigal son sort of story. So, Jordan, how about start by telling us about your upbringing, which will paint a picture for us of how your journey began.
Yeah, so I've grown up in a church environment um, since my whole life. Um, Obviously, granddad is the pastor of our church. Both of the parents went to the church. So my whole life was about church and about the family of church. It was about up until 17 where I started kind of going up and down with church and things like that. And then about 24, the age of 24, I pretty much just went cold turkey. And um, so my mum and my dad, they separated. I think I was about 15 or so. Um, so I grew up in a dysfunctional family, as it were, lots of violence and abuse growing up. Um, I did have granddad, which was really cool. He was a big influence in my life. He was probably the glue that actually held me together sanity wise. Um, he was so I kind of related to Granddad in a good way because he was into bodybuilding back in the day, and so when I was younger, I wanted to obviously aspire to be like that. So I had not just a biblical side to kind of relate to Granddad, but also hobbies wise, I could relate to him as well. So bodybuilding was kind of a good way to relate to him other than church. But of course, Granddad being Granddad, if anyone knows Granddad, he's always trying to sneak little little words of wisdom in there to anyone. Um, so I moved, so about 17, 18 after school, I moved to Blenheim for 2 years and went away from, that was kind of really where church became kind of on and off. Came back 2 years later. And then later on in my life, I went to the UK for 2 years. So I lived in England for 2 years, and that's when I really went off the rails, and things in my whole life just kind of took a turn for the worst. Um, yeah, I didn't really have kind of clear direction about anything in my life after those points. It was just kind of God was kind of an afterthought, really. I
Mm,
suppose would be the way to explain it.
okay. So you were brought up in the church,
Mm.
albeit in a dysfunctional family life. So just give us a bit more detail about when you actually moved away from the church, sort of a bit more about that.
Yeah, so probably 24. 24 was when I really gave up church. And I kind of lived in the world, like as most young adults and teenagers do, they drink and do drugs and sleeping around. And, most of the things that I did, as a teenager, they're not like shocking to the world. It's just a normal thing for them. But that's kind of the lifestyle I lived, even though obviously growing up in a church, it was very disrespectful. Um, I did still have a conscience. I still obviously got enough ingrained in me in the church that I wasn't so far gone. I still felt convicted and grieved to do these things, but I think because um, I didn't really have spirit led guidance throughout my life, so I didn't really listen to it. It was just kind of a thought in my head that I'm like, I know I shouldn't do these things, but oh well, kind of mentality. Yeah, and so like having that mentality of living in the world, I think when you when you know that you should be doing a certain thing or living a certain way, um, but you don't, and you live in the world, I felt very ashamed to kind of go back to church because like even though I know the church is like at the most least judgment way or judgment place, you kind of still feel judged, and so like you feel kind of ashamed, like granddad's the
Mm,
pastor, and like what are they going to think of me? Like I've lived my whole life in the church, and now I'm living in the world, and it's like you don't really want to show your face anymore, and so you stop kind of participating just because of what you think people are going to think of you. Um, Kind of, I guess, like the prodigal son, as you explained. Um, I do remember feeling very alone a lot of my life. I felt very kind of isolated from everything. I mean, there were countless times where I would just start breaking down, crying, looking at how my life has gone. Um, feeling very empty and depressed and just very low. It's a really lonely place to go when you kind of you know the truth, but you're just so proud, I guess you call it, that you don't want to accept help. You don't want to, so you kind of just stick to yourself. And so I did that. I did a lot of that. I did a lot of, I felt like no one actually really cared or actually knew anything about me. Um, yeah, it kind of, it did the opposite effect though. Feeling sad and sorry for yourself actually, it made me feel a lot more proud and arrogant actually because it hardened me. It made me like because I got to the points where I was like, well, I'm so depressed, I'm so sad, and I don't even want to feel like that again. And so I started to kind of, like tough man mentality myself out of it. Yeah, I didn't want to feel lonely anymore, and so I started to kind of embrace the world a little bit more,
And fill the gaps with
yeah,
that stuff. Yeah,
filling the
yeah,
void, yeah.
yeah. So, can you recall? I know it's probably a little while ago now, but can you recall and give us an insight into your mindset? Like what was going through your mind when you left? For example, were you thinking, oh, this church Christianity stuff, what a load of nonsense. I don't want a bar of it. Or were you thinking, you know what? Yeah, the church is teaching the right thing, but I just want to go my own way, even though I know it's wrong. But can you remember the thought process of justification when you left?
Uh, I kind of really only just remember like just being prideful and just knowing that I just want to do what I want to do. Like it wasn't that I didn't believe in God, and it wasn't that I didn't like like the religion side of things was like, oh, it's all waste of time and stuff. But it's just I feel like there was just no conviction in my heart. There was no like it didn't process for me. So like I was just very selfish, proud, arrogant. Um, yes, like I mean, obviously, I never would think the other way and be like, oh, everything like I don't not believe in God. Um, but yeah, it was just hard. Like I remember falling out with Granddad at the end of it. It wasn't really because of what he did. It was just because of my mentality of where I was. Like I remember he saying to me, like, if you keep living your life the way you are, I don't expect to see you in the kingdom and stuff like that. It was quite tough to hear, but it was like I didn't care. Um, a lot of all the other good things that Granddad said in the church, the talks of church was still there. Like I had the knowledge of basic Bible understanding, so it's not like I just forgot it. I didn't have a conviction in my heart to care. I wasn't Holy Spirit led, as it were, at that time. Um, I remember trying to fill my time because like I felt like I needed to do something with my time. I remember filling it with a lot of worldly things. I guess that's where the parties came in and the drinking and the friends and all that kind of stuff. Um, and it's all good. Like to do all that stuff, you kind of, I guess, it eases the temporariness of life, but it doesn't last for long periods of time. It's not something that you can sustain, and it's not something that you can constantly do. You eventually pick up really bad habits, and then before you know it, you're angry at everything, and you don't care about what people think, and the way you talk, and it's like a really, really bad spiral to go down. Um, but a good saying I heard from, I think it was you, but as my life, I basically hit rock bottom. Um, And it says, but eventually, through hitting rock bottom spiritually, I realized that God was the rock at the bottom, and my firm foundation. He was the one who never left. He was always there and loved me this whole time. I did get bitter towards people who were actually just trying to help me, and tell me how to live my life. But I was very defensive, so I built this very utter layer to not be able to get affected by people, what they say about me, what they think about me. Um, and it's a very defensive barrier, and the safety of just not caring what people think of you. Um, I didn't want to listen to anyone's advice, but of course we know that God is awesome, and so God already knew that this whole process and this spiraling downward that I was going through, He knew I had to kind of go through the whole process, to realize that, like, it's going to lead to depression, it's going to lead to loneliness, but it's like God gets you to that point, but He doesn't just leave you there. You put yourself in the situation. Well, I put myself in that situation, and He didn't just leave me there. He came in afterwards, like he was like, he's at the point where now I can mold him, and that's exactly what He did. So,
no, that's cool. So we're nearing the point in your life where there was about to be a change.
yeah.
So what did the actual moment of returning back to the Lord look like, in practice?
So the turnaround, I guess you call. Um, I would say that He needed to let this process happen. Like if people couldn't help me either. Like my mind was just fixed on, I don't want to hear any advice. So He had to let this process. Of course, unfortunately, it ran itself right into the ground. It's my life. But it all really kind of started actually when I met my wife, and we had my son and my first boy, and because only the people in the church, the CRC, like the actual church, will know Kelsey. She's a very loving, she's a very nurturing and kind-hearted person. She's very, very sweet, and she hasn't changed how she is in front of people to how she was to me when I first met her. And so, like, I had disconnected myself and detached myself from kind of the emotional side of things. I wasn't really an emotional person anymore. But after meeting her, like, it just shifted. My whole mind changed. My whole mind shifted. Um, I wrote down here. Um, she changed everything about how I saw myself and how I saw people and how to truly love. And she loved me when I was so imperfect that she shouldn't have even loved me. She did it, and it made me remember Jesus and His love and His death, not just for me, but for all of us, like all of us. And when we were sinners, He died for us. What kind of love is that, honestly? So yeah, it just rocked me to my core. How undeserving we are. And look at me, such an active sinner. Honestly, I felt horrible. I felt sick to my stomach. And I just felt that the love of Christ and of God was all around me at that point. And so also working in my prison environment, like every day that I went to work when I first started, I was nervous. Like I was, going into jail, you don't know what to expect. I'd never worked in jail or in a condition like this before. And so the first instinct I did was, I need to pray. So I mean, I wasn't born again at this point, but I knew obviously from all the lessons that I learned from church and from Granddad that like prayer is powerful. And so what I'd do is I'd pray. I would spend my drive to work praying to God. First, they started off very small, and they started off just like dear God, please protect my family. Please keep me safe at work. And I felt like even at that point, it was still very selfish of me to just be praying for safety. I hadn't prayed to God in years, and here I am going to work, and I'm like, oh, hey God, like you can protect me now, like like it's just typical human mentality. Like it worked. So we have chaplains at work. I don't know if I mentioned this in the last, but if I did. But so I was seeking chaplains as well, and so I was having conversations with the chaplains, and basically told them that like I knew I wanted to change my life. I knew like I believed in God and I believed Jesus was the only way to heaven. All of these things I still knew, but obviously I didn't put any of it applicable to my life. And so I started going to the chaplains, seeking guidance from them, and then going home and praying. And then I met fellow prison officers and prisoners, both that were Christians and had given their life to the Lord. Um, so this combination of all these things together was starting to like make me get back on board with it. And I was like, like I need to change my life. I've got a kid now. I've got a child, and like the man is the head of the house. God has told us that the man is what leads the family to God. And so I needed to be a good example. I knew exactly what kind of example I didn't want, and that was obviously my father.
Mm.
And so all of these things that like it was just the beginning of it. And so this process started and was going on for a long period of time. Um, and every day was the same. I was relying on prayer to get me through. And then I started realizing before I knew it that I was prioritizing with time with God again. I was I still didn't have the full conviction that I do now. I think it was because I was still kind of in my own way using and abusing what it would seem like, just to kind of God protect me. But then it became more personal, like the relationship started to get better. Um, and then all of this process, one day it culminated into. So I was sitting in front of the fire one day. I think Chelsea had gone out to do something, and I was just sitting at home by myself. And I thought, I'm gonna light the fire. I think it was the middle of the day, so there's no reason to have a fire, but I lit the fire. And I was just sitting in front of the fire one day, and I just remember thinking and looking back at my whole life and what I knew and what I knew about Jesus and what he did for me and just the love. And that moment, I just felt this intense heat, not from fire, this intense heat that was just culminated through my whole body. And I just remember breaking down. Like I cried and I was just sorry and I just felt stupid for the way I was living my life and just the emptiness that the world offered me and just the unsatisfaction and just knowing that even through that whole process of rejecting God and rejecting the church and trying to be selfish and living my whole way, he never left. He was there the whole time. And so like it's the most intense feeling I've ever had in my life. Like even to this day, my whole body felt like I was having a seizure because I was shaking so much and crying so much and just sorry so much. And it just felt afterwards the peace, no kind of feeling like it, just overwhelming peace. And I knew from that point on, like that was the Holy Spirit. I knew a feeling because you kind of learn about it. But since I wasn't convicted throughout my whole process of even being baptized when I was younger, I never felt like I felt in that moment. And from that point on, I knew that God had called me and I knew that I didn't want to live my life that way anymore. And I knew that I wanted my family to live for the Lord like I wanted to. And it was just this moment of realization, I think would be the best way to put it.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really great. So what motivation has your prodigal son experience given you in the way you live your life now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I made a pretty big mess of my life up to that point. I did a lot of bad things that got me to the point where I was. I was just a scumbag, man. Like honestly, like so the things that I did, like you want to live a different way, but it doesn't disintegrate the baggage that you've built your whole life. Like I didn't spend my whole life living that way, but I spent a good chunk of my life, especially my adult life, and so I knew what I was doing. And so you just have to unlearn. I had to unlearn a lot of things. Fortunately, because my wife was so amazing and she kind of wins half the battle for me, I'd say about 90% of what I did and how I was and how I acted and and things like that. That kind of just went away with being married and having a kid and being responsible adult. Um, but there was probably 5% left, and I still battle today. Like just because I've been converted and just because I live for the Lord, it doesn't mean I don't have shortcomings. It doesn't mean I still am this perfect human. I make mistakes every day, all the time. But I'm aware of it. I'm aware and I'm actively trying not to do the things that I know are contrary to the word, contrary to God. And knowing that God's always watching you is kind of an encouraging thought, because it's not like you can go anywhere and hide somewhere in a room and God doesn't then not see you. He's always there. And so having a fear of the Lord, a healthy fear of the Lord, I think is kind of the big thing. He's changing the mentality of that I have. Like I've had a very hard heart. Like I didn't want to listen to advice. I didn't care what people had to say. Never really cried. Never had emotion. And I feel like, I don't know if it's an age thing. I'm not that old, but but it's one of those things where you start to get emotional. Like I listen to a praise and worship song, and then I think of Jesus and what he did for me, and I just lose it. Like I just cry, and I'm just so grateful and thankful. And so he's always working in my life to kind of, it's a process, like it's not just overnight that you get converted and then you live perfectly and happily ever after. It's a process of failing constantly. But I know that I love Jesus and what he's done for me, what he's done for my family, and the blessings that I've been given. And I know where I want my life to go. I know that I want him to be the center and the focal point of it. So many things have changed. Like I'd never read my Bible either. Like so the whole entirety of my Christian upbringing in the church, I'd never read the Bible. At Sunday school, we read some stuff. I never listened to Christian music. I never did any of these things. But now, like, I can't survive, without reading my Bible. Like I just feel empty if I don't read it. My entire Spotify album is just Christian music, and it's quite fun going through your old playlist of all the music that you used to listen to and realizing like I used to listen to that rubbish. Those are just kind of like those small things, but like it's the small things when there's enough of them that they all add up. And like I don't listen to anything that doesn't glorify God now. I try not to read anything that is not going to advance me to know God better. And I'm just so grateful that I'm back in the church now, and I'm so grateful that it wasn't just that mentality that I had that they're going to look at me and look down on me because of my life, but they're actually supporting. Like the church is there encouraging me to do these talks and encouraging me to understand what God's nature is and what Jesus did for us and all these things that kind of all Christians take for granted. But like the brotherhood from all of that is what sticks everything together, as well as knowing my family and I want to live for the Lord. Yeah.
You talk there about that time in front of the fire, which obviously was your coming to yourself, and that prodigal son parable Jesus gave. He talked about how the prodigal son, when he came to himself, and that's when he humbled himself, he became repentant, he went back to the Father. So that was your coming to yourself time, wasn't it? And I can remember you as a child being a very sensitive child. So, when you talk about how, being astray from the Lord, you wouldn't cry, you became hard, et cetera, et cetera. I think what you'd done is you'd actually put up a wall on who you were already to deal with that sensitivity towards God. So when you came to yourself, that all managed to get stripped away, and that sensitivity that God had already given you was able to come through, where you can weep for your sins and weep about the goodness of God. So finally, Jordan, or maybe not finally, we might have another couple of impromptu points, but can you leave us with, we got a bit to go.
Number 6.
Yeah, I think I asked you that one.
Did you?
Yeah, or did you have more to share on that last one? That was what motivation has your prodigal son experienced?
Yes, sorry, you are right.
Got a bit more to go. You want to finish that bit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll keep going.
Yeah, you can go.
Hi, John. um, yeah, so
You turn the page in your life.
I've turned a page in my life and on the sheet as well. Um, so here's a good point that I was going to say. It's looking at how my life kind of was. We know that Jesus wants us to build up treasures in heaven, where moth and rust don't affect it. Which means as a father, as a husband, as a working man, I'm trying to always now stand for God in His ways. So it's easy for me now because I'm so convicted of how I used to live. Um, in comparison to what I do now, it's very easy for me to be bold in my job, and it's not so hard in my personal life with my family because my wife is on board with it as well. But being loving and being humble and meek and all these attributes that maybe originally I did have them, but I built a wall. I didn't have them, and so he's given me feel like a good responsibility now because my life now is back on track with him, um, to guide the family, and treat her right. Um, my life just feels like it's got more purpose now. Like not just because of a family and not just because of kids, but because that all circles around God, and it's not just about having a wife and children now. Um, like I have all this now responsibility for salvation from them. Like Jesus has offered us salvation. It's now up to us to receive that and to live the life that He has called us to live. Um, Again, like that doesn't mean that I don't fail. Like I still fail. Do I get it right all the time? Nope. But I will never ever go back to the person that I was. I will never go back to the world. And I know for a fact I can swear this that I will never ever reject Christ again. It's just something that like He doesn't just save our lives when He died for our sins, but He has saved my life by coming back into my life. Um, and it's just something that I know all of us have felt and we can relate to because we all lived in the world. We as I said in my last talk, you are in the world, but you don't have to be of the world. And I think it's probably the most things that I hold on to is not ever looking back at myself back then and saying I know now, kind of like my father, what I don't want to be like, and it's the same with my own personal self. So
I mean,
that was the
thanks, Jordan. So, can you leave us with some words of advice to others? Look, you were a lost sheep. You were the prodigal son, to use those biblical analogies. And there are others out there just like you. There are youngsters who've even been through our own church, our own family members who are actually in that situation. So you've been there and you've come out and returned back to the Lord. You've experienced that. So you've got a testimony. So can you leave us with some personal words of advice from yourself to others who may be a lost sheep currently? Some might be in the initial stages because there's obviously different stages of backsliding, different stages of being a lost sheep. They might still be in the partying mode, or they might be at the place where they're actually eating the pig slop like the prodigal son, not knowing where to turn. Can you just finish up today, Jordan, just sharing some advice to them as to what they should do?
Yeah. I just want to add that I thought of this on the spot, just so you know. So I don't know it off by heart, so sorry, I'm just going to have to look at my notes that I've written. So it says, the world is enticing and can tell you and show you a lot of false hope and temporary joy. But from what I know, there is no greater joy than to be a child of God. He loves you. And myself personally, I have 3 boys. I have 2 boys with one on the way. And I couldn't imagine not having a relationship with them. Do you realize that that's only a fraction of how God feels about you? He made you. Of course, he wants the best for you, and you are thought about by him more than there are grains of sand on the seashore. I would encourage you, wherever you are today, just know that don't focus on where you are currently, the sin that you're living in, and your shortcomings. Focus on the love of God. Come home and realize just how much greater your life will change if you give your heart to God. My life and my heart and mentality completely shifted because there is hope, peace, and joy for the salvation God offers. Jesus is coming back soon, and you have no idea when your last day is. Are you ready? If not, stop wasting time. I know if I could, I would.
Thanks, Jordan. Appreciate that. So that's Jordan's testimony of how he backslid from the Lord. It's a common thing that happens, but how the Lord sought you out. And if I was to again sort of the one word, and there's a lot of things going on with God by His Spirit in your life there, but I think the turning point was love. The love of Kelsey, your wife, which basically showed you the love of God, which reminded you, if you like, of the love of God. And I think we talked a bit about this recently, and it's a good thing we do, because love is such a powerful force. And as the people of God, God calls us to be loving as well, to the unlovely, to the unloved, because it is a powerful force that brought you back. And the other thing I noticed in your testimony, Jordan, when you talked about that turning point happening, God was like giving you a barrage from different angles. You talked about Christians who were prisoners, Christians who were officers. You had your wife, coming at you in love.
The chaplain.
Obviously, yeah, the chaplains, the fact that God had taken you to the proverbial pig pen where you felt stressed, you felt lonely, all of that. And I can testify to exactly the same when I got converted. I was running from the message, from the gospel. But God sends me this person, that person, that person, that person. And I remember thinking at the time, Lord, you're after me. I think I've just got to bow the knee, it had come to that time.
Yeah.
So that's the way God works. So, we can sort of promise you, if you're one of those people out there, one of the prodigals, one of the lost sheep, and God has you predestined, and maybe you're experiencing this very thing at the moment. You're experiencing the love, the grace, God's at you. You've reached the bottom from all angles. Don't waste any more time. As Jordan said, just say yes, bow the knee, and start experiencing that peace and that joy and that love that can be yours again. God can wash away all the baggage, fix up all the problems, create a new creation. That's what the Bible talks about, doesn't it, Jordan?
Amen.
We're a new creation, a new person, and you've testified to that today. So thanks, Jordan. It's not easy to sort of hang your dirty washing out, as it were, to talk about the things that we're ashamed of. But I honour you for that, because in doing so, you've shown us the contrast that there is to be had in the Lord. By sharing the bad, you've been able to glorify God and show us what can be achieved in the Spirit of God. So thanks, Jordan.